Captain John Miller sat very still in his uncomfortable seat at the back of the Galactic Council chamber. The massive room curved in a perfect circle with rising tiers of seats, each filled with representatives from the most powerful species in the known universe. Floating platforms carried smaller aliens who couldn't use the standard seats. Holographic projections showed delegates who couldn't breathe the chamber's air mix. John kept his face blank as the Zoraxian ambassador, a tall blue-skinned being with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like small suns, stepped to the central speaking platform. "And now we must address the continuing problem of humans," the Zoraxian said, his universal translator giving his words a metallic edge. 5 years of observer status has proven what many of us suspected. They are simply not ready. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. John noticed how many species nodded or made their equivalent gestures of approval. Their technology is primitive. Their ships barely manage faster than light travel. Their weapons would be laughable if they weren't so dangerous in such unpredictable hands, continued the ambassador. And their genetic makeup? Unstable, prone to disease, short-lived, aggressive. John's jaw tightened, but he maintained his diplomatic calm. He was here to observe and report back, not to cause an incident. "I propose that humans be restricted to their home system until they have evolved beyond their violent tendencies," the Zoraxian said, "for the safety of all civilized species." The chamber erupted in approving sounds. Some delegates pounded appendages on their consoles. Others flashed colors across their bodies to show agreement. The few species who remained silent caught John's attention. Mostly newer additions to the council who had likely faced similar treatment in the past. The council leader, a gaseous entity contained in a hovering crystal sphere, moved to the center. "We will now vote on the Zoraxian proposal to quarantine the human species to their home system for a period of no less than 100 galactic standard years." John's heart sank. 100 galactic years meant 4 generations of humans would never see beyond their solar system. All those in favor. A sea of limbs, tentacles, and light signals rose across the chamber. Those opposed. Only a handful of delegates indicated dissent. "The motion carries," announced the council leader. "The human representative may respond." All eyes, sensory organs, and perception devices turned toward John. He stood slowly and walked to the central platform. The walk felt like miles. "The United Earth Government acknowledges the Council's decision," John said, his voice steadier than he felt. "We request the standard review period before implementation." "Granted," said the Council leader. "You have 1 standard galactic year before the quarantine begins." John nodded and returned to his seat as the Council moved on to other matters. For the next 3 hours, he sat through discussions of trade routes, boundary disputes, and resource allocations. All the while, his mind raced with the implications of what had happened. When the session finally ended, John quickly gathered his materials and headed for his ship. Several delegates brushed past him, some deliberately bumping into him as if he carried some disease. An elderly delegate from the Calibian system, a small creature with wrinkled gray skin, approached him in the corridor. "They mocked my people too. When we first arrived," the alien said quietly. "Remember that fear often wears the mask of contempt." Before John could respond, the Calibian shuffled away. Back on his ship, John prepared for the long journey home. He reviewed the recordings of the session, each word of mockery cutting deeper on the second hearing. His communication officer offered to edit the most insulting parts before they transmitted the report to Earth. "No," John said firmly. "Earth needs to hear every word, every insult, every dismissal." He stared at the stars through the view screen. "We're not going to hide from this. We're going to answer it." As the ship broke orbit and set course for Earth, John thought about the decades of work that had gone into reaching the Galactic Council. All the sacrifices, the scientific breakthroughs, the diplomatic efforts, all to be laughed at and restricted. "They've made a mistake," he whispered to himself. "They think they know humanity, but they don't understand us at all." The room fell silent as the recording ended. Defense Secretary Laura Bennett stood at the head of the long table, her face grim in the dim light. Around her sat Earth's brightest minds, scientists, military leaders, and diplomats. All of them had just watched humanity being mocked and sentenced to isolation by the Galactic Council. "That's the situation," Laura said, turning off the projection. "We have 1 year before the quarantine begins." Admiral Susan Collins, the highest-ranking military officer present, spoke first. "We should build up our defenses. If they think we're violent now, wait until they try to enforce this quarantine." Several heads nodded in agreement, but Dr. Alan Parker, a thin man with tired eyes and rumpled clothes, raised his hand. "More weapons won't solve this. The Council races are thousands of years ahead of us technologically. We can't win that way. So we just accept being trapped in our own solar system?" asked Susan, her voice rising. "Let them laugh at us and lock us away." Captain John Miller, who had delivered the recording, stepped forward. "I don't think we should accept anything. But I agree with Dr. Parker that a military response isn't the answer." Diplomat Olivia Wright tapped her pen against her notepad. "What about forming alliances with other marginalized species? I noticed a few council members didn't vote for the quarantine." "Too risky," said Laura. "Any species seen helping us would face council punishment." The room fell into frustrated silence until Dr. Parker cleared his throat. "I have an idea. It's unconventional." All eyes turned to him. "The aliens mock us for being primitive, violent, and unstable. But those traits came from evolving on a harsh, changing planet. Most council races evolved in stable environments. They've never had to adapt like we have." He stood and began pacing. "I propose Project Renaissance. We use our human uniqueness, our adaptability, creativity, our different way of thinking, to leapfrog their technology completely." "How exactly?" Susan asked skeptically. "By approaching problems from angles they'd never consider. They've had thousands of years of technological development, but they're stuck in their ways of thinking. We need to look at the same problems with fresh eyes." Laura looked intrigued. "You're suggesting we can out-innovate species with far more advanced technology?" "I'm suggesting," Dr. Parker said, "that sometimes the tortoise beats the hare. Not by trying to outrun it, but by taking a different path entirely." The room buzzed with conversation. John Miller watched as the idea took hold. Some were skeptical, others excited. Laura called for quiet. "We'd need full global cooperation," she said. "Every nation, every resource." "We'd need absolute secrecy too," added Susan. "The Council has spies on Earth." Dr. Parker nodded. "And we'd need to identify areas where our human perspective might give us advantages." Laura looked around the room, taking measure of each person. "I'll present this to world leaders, but I need to know, is this the path we want to take? Not isolation, not military buildup, but a massive push to innovate our way past them." "It's the only path that makes sense," John said quietly. "I saw their faces in that chamber. They don't fear us. They dismiss us. That's their weakness." One by one, heads nodded around the table. Even the military representatives seemed to warm to the idea. "Then it's settled," Laura said. "I'll arrange secure facilities around the world. Dr. Parker, you'll coordinate the scientific teams. Admiral Collins, we'll need security protocols like nothing we've ever implemented before." As the meeting broke up, John approached Dr. Parker. "Do you really think we can do this? Catch up to species that have had interstellar travel for thousands of years?" Dr. Parker smiled for the first time. "No, Captain. I don't think we'll catch up to them." He paused. "I think we'll pass them." Outside the meeting room, the sun was setting over Washington, D.C. Within hours, similar meetings would be happening in capitals across the world. Project Renaissance would begin with a whisper, but if Dr. Parker was right, it would end with humanity answering the Council's mockery in a way no one expected. Laura watched the others leave, then turned to her secure phone. "Get me the president," she said. Tell him it's time for humanity to show the galaxy who we really are. 3 months after Project Renaissance began, Dr. Samantha Reed stood in the main laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains. The massive underground complex hummed with activity. Scientists from every nation worked side by side, their differences forgotten in the face of the galactic challenge. "Show me what you found," Samantha said to the team gathered around the central table. Dr. Eric Jones, a computer specialist with thick glasses, pulled up a holographic display. "The aliens think in straight lines. Their computing systems are incredibly fast but inflexible. We humans think in messy, creative ways. So we built this." The display showed a strange computer system that looked more like a living organism than a machine. "It's a neural adaptive system," Eric explained. "It learns and changes like a human brain, creating new pathways for each problem it faces." Samantha watched the system solve a complex equation by completely reorganizing itself. The council races would never build computers this way. "Because they've never had to," said Eric. "Their worlds were stable. They never evolved to adapt quickly." Across the lab, materials scientist Grace Martinez waved Samantha over. On her workbench sat a small cube of dull metal. "This looks ordinary," Grace said, "but watch what happens when I apply pressure." She pressed the cube between two metal plates. Instead of bending or breaking, the cube seemed to flow and reshape itself. "It's an adaptive alloy that reorganizes at the molecular level," Grace explained. "Earth has more elemental diversity than most council worlds. We combined elements they've never thought to mix." Samantha touched the metal as it cooled and hardened again. "Can we scale this up?" "Already working on it," Grace replied with a smile. In another section of the complex, energy specialist Kevin Wright demonstrated a power system that mimicked plant photosynthesis but was 100 times more efficient. "Plants convert sunlight to energy. We improved the process," he said proudly. "No other species in the council has energy systems like this because their biology evolved differently." Samantha gathered her notes and headed to the weekly briefing with Defense Secretary Laura Bennett. As she walked through the facility, she passed dozens of similar projects, each using humanity's unique perspective to solve problems in new ways. Laura was waiting in the conference room with Captain John Miller and diplomat Jack Garcia, who had been quietly gathering intelligence from alien representatives on Earth. "Progress report," Laura asked as Samantha sat down. "Better than expected," Samantha said. "We've identified 3 key areas where human thinking gives us advantages: adaptive computing, materials science, and energy systems." Jack leaned forward. "The council races are getting suspicious. They're asking why certain scientists have disappeared from public view." "What have you told them?" asked John. "That we're sulking," Jack said with a small smile. "Withdrawing to lick our wounds after the council's decision. They believe it because it fits their view of humans as emotional and unstable." Laura nodded. "Good. We need more time." "There's something else," Samantha added. "We've noticed that all council technology follows similar design principles. It's like they're all working from the same rulebook, just at different levels." "Makes sense," John said. "The older races guided the development of younger ones. They all learned from the same teachers." "That's our opportunity," Samantha said excitedly. "We're the only species that developed completely independently. We're looking at problems with truly fresh eyes." Laura studied the progress reports. "The question is, can we make enough progress in the time we have left? The quarantine begins in 9 months. We won't have everything perfected," Samantha admitted. "But we're making breakthroughs every day. And some of them," she paused, "some of them will change everything." As the meeting ended, John walked with Samantha toward the laboratory. "Do you really believe we can do this?" he asked quietly. Samantha stopped and looked through a window where dozens of scientists worked with intense focus. "When I was a girl, my father told me something I never forgot," she said. "He said that throughout history, the most powerful force wasn't strength or resources. It was underestimation." She turned to John. The Council has done us a favor by underestimating humanity. And now we're going to show them just how wrong they were. Physicist Daniel Hayes stared at the equations floating in the holographic display. For 8 months, Project Renaissance teams had been working around the clock. Now, at 3 in the morning in the Movav Desert facility, Daniel had spotted something no one else had seen. "Computer, run the simulation again," he said, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. The numbers flowed across the screen, forming patterns that no alien race had ever considered. Most species approached quantum fields as fixed structures, but Daniel saw them as flowing rivers that could be redirected. "It works," he whispered as the simulation completed successfully. "It actually works." He sent an urgent message to Dr. Samantha Reed. Within an hour, she arrived with a team of bleary-eyed scientists. "This better be good, Daniel," she said, but fell silent as he showed her the results. "The aliens all think of quantum fields linearly," Daniel explained. "But I approached it like water flowing around rocks. If we build engines based on this principle, we could achieve speeds no council race has ever reached." Samantha finished his thought. Her eyes widened as she understood the implications. "How soon can we build a prototype?" 2 weeks for a small-scale test," Daniel replied. Across the facility, materials scientist Grace Martinez was making her own breakthrough. The adaptive alloy she had developed could now restructure itself at the molecular level based on external conditions. A ship hull made of this material could strengthen itself against attacks or become more heat-resistant during atmospheric entry. The council races would never have discovered this, Grace told Samantha during their progress review. "Their materials are stronger than ours, but fixed. Ours can adapt to threats they never imagined." Project Renaissance had hit its stride. Breakthroughs happened weekly now. The research teams had moved from theory to practical applications. In a massive underground hangar, engineers were assembling a prototype ship incorporating their new technologies. Admiral Susan Collins watched the construction with growing pride. "6 months ago, I didn't believe this was possible," she admitted to Laura Bennett. "Now I'm thinking we might actually pull this off." "Don't celebrate yet," Laura cautioned. "We still have 3 months before the quarantine begins, and a lot could go wrong." Her words proved prophetic. The next morning, alarms blared throughout the Movav facility. Daniel rushed to the prototype testing chamber to find equipment destroyed and his research files corrupted. Security Chief William Ross sealed the facility immediately. "Sabotage," he said grimly after inspecting the damage. "Someone got past our security protocols." Within hours, counterintelligence specialist Diane Foster had reviewed all security footage. "There," she said, pointing to a seemingly normal technician. "Watch his reflection in the glass." The team peered closer. In the reflection, the technician's eyes briefly glowed with an unnatural light. "Optical camouflage," Diane explained. "Advanced technology. One of the alien species has infiltrated us." The discovery sent shockwaves through Project Renaissance. Laura convened an emergency meeting with all section heads. "This changes everything," she said. "Not only do we need to rebuild the damaged prototype, but we need to completely overhaul our security." "There's something else," Diane added. "While investigating, we found communications between the saboteur and someone in the Galactic Council. They specifically mentioned preventing humans from developing new propulsion systems." John Miller leaned forward. "Why would they care so much about stopping us? The quarantine would keep us contained anyway." "Unless," Samantha said slowly, "they know something we don't. Maybe they're afraid of what we might discover." Daniel nodded. "My breakthrough isn't just about faster ships. If developed further, it could revolutionize energy production, weapon systems, even communication methods." A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. "So it's not just about keeping us in our place," Laura said finally. "They're actively trying to prevent our advancement." John's eyes hardened, which means the mockery in the council wasn't just cultural snobbery. It was deliberate suppression. "We need to find out which species is behind this," Diane said. And we need to know if they're working alone or with council approval. As the meeting disbanded, Daniel pulled Samantha aside. The sabotage set us back, but not as far as they think. I kept certain key equations only in my head. Samantha smiled. Human paranoia coming in handy again. Exactly, Daniel replied. They're counting on us thinking like them, but we don't, and that's our greatest advantage. Security Chief William Ross stared at the holographic display showing connections between known alien spies on Earth. Red lines linked the recent saboteur to the Viridian Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful members of the Galactic Council. It goes deeper than we thought, William told Diane Foster as they prepared their report. The Viridians have had agents on Earth since first contact. Diane nodded grimly. And they're not the only ones watching us. She pulled up another set of data. We've identified surveillance from at least 3 other council races. The evidence was presented to Laura Bennett and the Project Renaissance leadership team the next morning. The room was silent as they absorbed the implications. So the Viridians sabotaged our prototype, Laura said finally. But why? They're one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. They shouldn't feel threatened by us. John Miller, who had been quietly reviewing the intelligence reports, looked up. Unless they'd been doing this to everyone. All eyes turned to him. Think about it, John continued. The Viridians are among the oldest council members. What if they've been systematically suppressing technological development across multiple species? Not just humans, but others too. Diplomat Jack Garcia nodded slowly. That would explain why some council members seemed uncomfortable with how we were treated. Maybe they've experienced similar suppression. We need to find out if this is true, Laura decided. Jack, can you discreetly contact representatives from other newer council races? It would be risky, Jack replied. But I know a few who might talk. While the diplomatic team worked on gathering intelligence, William and Diane strengthened security around all Project Renaissance facilities. They developed new protocols and screening methods to detect disguised aliens. 2 weeks later, Jack returned from a series of secret meetings with troubling news. It's worse than we thought, he told the assembled team. The Viridians have been manipulating council politics for centuries. They identify promising species and then either recruit them as allies or ensure they remain technologically inferior. How do they decide which species to suppress? Asked Samantha. Any species with a thinking pattern different from their own is seen as a threat, Jack explained. The Viridians believe their linear, logical approach is superior. Humans, with our creative, adaptive thinking, were immediately flagged as dangerous. John leaned forward. Were we specifically targeted for mockery to prevent us from forming alliances? Exactly, Jack confirmed. The humiliation was deliberate. By painting us as primitive and violent, they ensured no one would risk associating with us. And we're not alone, Jack continued. I've made contact with representatives from 5 other species who have faced similar treatment. All of them are relatively new to the galactic community, all with unique cognitive approaches. Laura's face hardened. Do these other species know about the Viridian manipulation? They suspect, but lack proof, Jack said. I shared some of our evidence with them, and they're interested in cooperation. You mean an alliance? Admiral Susan Collins asked. An unofficial one, for now, Jack clarified, away from council oversight. The implications were enormous. Humanity was not alone in being suppressed, and potential allies existed among the stars. John Miller spent the next week in secret meetings with representatives from these other marginalized species. In a secure facility beneath Geneva, he met with delegates from the Calibians, Nexeri, Tellarian Union, and others. We all have pieces of the puzzle, said the Calibian elder, the same one who had spoken to John after the council humiliation. Together, we might see the full picture. The Nexari delegate, a crystalline being that communicated through light patterns, flashed in agreement. The Viridians fear our combined potential. Alone, none of us can challenge them. Together, we need to share knowledge. The Tellarian representative added, "Each of our species has developed technologies the Viridians couldn't predict because we think differently." As the meeting concluded, John felt a growing sense of hope. Project Renaissance had begun as humanity's response to mockery. Now it was evolving into something greater, the foundation for an alliance of underestimated species. Back at the main facility, Samantha received John's report with excitement. "This changes everything," she told Daniel and Grace. "We're not just developing technologies for ourselves now. We're building the foundation for a new kind of galactic community." Daniel smiled. "The Viridians wanted to keep us isolated and divided. Instead, they've given us common cause with others. And less than 2 months until the quarantine begins," Grace noted. "We need to work faster." 1 year after the humiliation in the Galactic Council, Earth made a surprising request. They asked for a special council session to present what they called a cultural demonstration. The council, curious about what the humans might attempt in their final days before quarantine, granted the request. The Grand Council chamber was packed with representatives from across the galaxy. Many came to witness what they assumed would be humanity's final desperate plea. The Shoraxian ambassador, who had led the mockery a year ago, sat with a smug expression in his prominent seat. John Miller entered the chamber alone, dressed in a simple blue uniform. He walked to the center with calm dignity. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," he began, "Earth thanks you for this opportunity. As you know, our quarantine begins tomorrow. Before that happens, we wish to share something with you." The chamber's massive view screen activated, showing a view of space near one of the Council's monitoring stations. "What you're about to see is being transmitted live," John explained. A murmur went through the chamber as a sleek ship appeared on screen. Unlike the bulky, functional human vessels they had seen before, this ship had an elegant, flowing design. It moved with a grace that caught the attention of even the most dismissive council members. "This is the U.S. Resolute," John announced, "the first ship of Earth's new fleet." The Viridian representative stood abruptly. "Is this some kind of primitive threat? Your quarantine terms forbid new military vessels." John smiled politely. "This is not a military vessel, but a demonstration craft. And the quarantine hasn't begun yet." The council leader signaled for silence. "Proceed with your demonstration, human." On screen, the Resolute began a series of maneuvers. It accelerated to speeds that made several council representatives sit forward in surprise. It changed course with impossible precision. When a series of test obstacles were released from the monitoring station, the ship's hull visibly adapted, flowing like liquid metal to optimal shapes for each challenge. "What you're seeing," John explained, "is the result of Project Renaissance, our response to the Council's assessment of humanity. Our ship uses a quantum field propulsion system that achieves speeds your vessels cannot match. Its hull is composed of adaptive alloy that responds to environmental conditions, and its computing systems learn and evolve like a living organism." The chamber had fallen completely silent. Even the normally chatty species were watching in stunned attention. "A year ago, we were mocked for our primitive technology," John continued, "for our violent tendencies and genetic inferiority. But what you saw as weaknesses were actually strengths you couldn't recognize. Humans evolved on a harsh, changing planet. We had to adapt constantly. That gave us a way of thinking that's different from yours. Not inferior, just different." The Resolute completed another series of maneuvers that should have been impossible according to Council understanding of physics. The Zoraxian ambassador rose to his feet. "This is clearly some kind of deception. No species could advance so quickly without outside help." "We had no outside help," John replied calmly. "Just human ingenuity and the motivation you provided when you humiliated us." The Viridian representative moved to the center of the chamber. "The Council demands that this technology be surrendered immediately for proper evaluation. It poses clear risks to galactic stability." John smiled. "With respect, we decline. But we do have an announcement." He paused, looking around the chamber. Earth will be sharing these technological advancements with all non-aggressive species, particularly those who have faced similar treatment by the Council. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some representatives shouted accusations, others demanded access to the human technologies, and a few, John noted, sat in thoughtful silence. The Council leader called for order. "Human, you risk severe consequences with this action." "The quarantine was your decision," John replied. "How we spend our time within our solar system is ours, and we choose to collaborate with others who understand what it means to be underestimated." As John left the chamber, several representatives hurried to speak with him privately. Most were from newer Council species who had recognized themselves in his words. Captain Nickel Harris, commanding the Resolute from orbit, sent a simple message to John's personal device. "Mission accomplished. The real work begins now." The Galactic Council fell into disarray in the weeks following Earth's demonstration. Emergency sessions ran day and night as the implications became clear. It wasn't just the advanced technology that worried them. It was Earth's announcement that they would share it with other species. In a secure meeting room on Luna Base, Earth's first off-world colony, representatives from 6 lesser Council races met with human leaders. The Calibian Elder sat next to delegates from the crystalline Nexari, the gaseous Talarians, and 3 other species who had faced similar treatment to humanity. "The Viridians have called for sanctions against all who work with humans," said the Talarian representative, his containment sphere glowing with concern. Laura Bennett smiled. "Let them try. The quarantine they imposed on us has an unexpected benefit. They can't legally enter our solar system to enforce their will. But they can target us," said the Nexari delegate, flashing patterns of worry across her crystalline surface. John Miller leaned forward. "That's why we're proposing something more formal than simple technology sharing. We're suggesting a cooperative alliance with mutual defense agreements." The assembled delegates exchanged glances. This was a major step beyond what they had initially discussed. Such an alliance would place us in direct opposition to the Council, the Calibian Elder noted. "The Council is already in opposition to our advancement," Samantha Reed pointed out. "They've been manipulating all of us for centuries." After hours of discussion, the delegates reached a consensus. The cooperative alliance would be formed with Earth as a founding member, despite the planet's quarantine status. Each member would contribute their unique technologies and perspectives. Dr. Frank Morgan, who had studied alien biology for decades, led a team of human scientists to help alliance members adapt Earth's breakthroughs to their own physiologies and environments. The quantum field propulsion system needs modifications to work with Talarian ship designs, Frank explained to his team as they prepared. Their gaseous nature requires different control interfaces. Within a month, the first joint human alliance ships were taking flight. Each vessel incorporated technologies from multiple species, creating capabilities the Galactic Council had never seen before. On Earth, news of the alliance spread hope. The quarantine that was meant to isolate humanity had instead spurred unprecedented cooperation with other species. Markets stabilized, and cultural exchanges flourished as alien representatives were welcomed in human cities. But not everyone was pleased. The Viridian Empire, seeing their influence slipping, began to gather their forces. Long-dormant warships were recommissioned. Military exercises were conducted near the territories of alliance members. "They're preparing for confrontation," Admiral Susan Collins told the Defense Committee as she reviewed the intelligence reports. "Our sources say they're particularly focused on Earth. They see us as the instigators." John Miller, now officially appointed as Earth's ambassador to the Alliance, received worrying news from their intelligence network. The Viridians have convinced several of their client species to join a peacekeeping fleet headed for the Sol system. "Peacekeeping," Laura scoffed. "They mean to make an example of us." The Alliance Council convened an emergency session. Some members advocated for preemptive strikes, while others suggested diplomatic overtures. "We should demonstrate our technological superiority again," suggested the Nexari representative. "Show them that conflict would be unwise." The Viridians won't be deterred by demonstrations, John said. They've built their empire on suppressing others. Our very existence as equals threatens everything they believe. As the debate continued, reports arrived that the Viridian fleet had entered the Proxima Centauri system, just over 4 light-years from Earth. They would arrive within days. We need to decide now, Laura urged the Alliance. Do we meet them with weapons or words? The Calibian elder spoke slowly. For centuries, many of us tried words. They answered with mockery and suppression. Perhaps it is time they understood we will not be dismissed again. The vote was unanimous. The Alliance would stand together. As the meeting adjourned, John approached Daniel Hayes, who had continued refining his quantum field theories. Tell me honestly, John said quietly. Can we win against their fleet? They outnumber us significantly. Daniel smiled. Numbers meant everything in old-style space combat. But with our technology, they're bringing knives to a gunfight. We've moved beyond our understanding of what's possible. The Viridian warfleet appeared at the edge of the Sol system, a massive array of battleships that had conquered countless worlds over centuries. Their hulls bore the scars of ancient conflicts, symbols of their military might. Earth's long-range sensors detected over 300 vessels approaching in tight formation. In the Alliance Command Center beneath Geneva, military and civilian leaders from all member species gathered around a holographic display of the incoming threat. They've arranged their ships in the traditional Viridian assault pattern, Admiral Susan Collins explained. It's the same formation they've used for 1,000 years. Because it's always worked for them, John Miller noted. Until today. Laura Bennett turned to Daniel Hayes. Is the defense network ready? Daniel nodded. All satellites are in position. The quantum field disruptors are online and synchronized. This was humanity's final surprise, a defensive system unlike anything the Galactic Council had ever seen. Based on Daniel's breakthrough understanding of quantum fields, the network could disrupt the functioning of traditional energy weapons and propulsion systems without harming organic life. The Talarian and Nexeri ships are in position, reported the Alliance military coordinator. Calibian observers are monitoring Viridian communications. The Viridian commander's message reached Earth on all frequencies, translated into every human language. His tone was imperious, confident in his superior position. Humans of Earth, your defiance of council law cannot be tolerated. Surrender your technological innovations immediately and disband your illegal alliance, or face the consequences. You have 1 hour to comply. Laura looked around the room at the representatives of species that had been bullied and suppressed for generations. I think we've all heard enough threats from the Viridians to last several lifetimes. Send our response. Captain Nickel Harris, commanding the U.S. Resolute at the front of the small Alliance Defense Fleet, transmitted their answer. Viridian Command, this is Captain Harris of Earth. We decline your offer and suggest you reconsider your approach to interspecies relations. The response was immediate. The Viridian fleet accelerated toward Earth, weapons systems activating across their armada. Energy readings spiked as they prepared to deliver a devastating first strike. Defense network activation in 3, 2, 1. Daniel counted down, then pressed his palm against the activation crystal. Throughout the Sol system, hundreds of small satellites simultaneously generated overlapping quantum fields. The effect was invisible but profound. As the fields spread outward, they intersected with the Viridian ships. On the command center screens, the Alliance watched as the massive fleet suddenly lost momentum. Their weapons powered down. Propulsion systems failed. Communication arrays went silent. The mighty armada drifted harmlessly in space, unable to advance or retreat, attack or defend. Not a single shot fired, Laura said with quiet satisfaction. Not a single life lost. The Alliance ships moved forward, surrounding the disabled Viridian fleet. Captain Harris hailed the Viridian flagship. Your weapons and engines will remain non-functional until we deactivate the quantum field disruptors. We are not interested in destruction or dominance. We seek only the freedom to develop without interference. 3 days later, representatives from the Galactic Council arrived to negotiate. The council chamber that had once echoed with mockery of humanity now fell silent as John Miller addressed the emergency session. The Cooperative Alliance proposes a reformed council, John said, one where all species are respected for their unique contributions, regardless of their age or origin. No more manipulation. No more suppression of emerging technologies. No more mockery of differences. The Viridian Empire, its military humbled and its centuries of manipulation exposed, found itself isolated. Many of its former allies now demanded investigation into past actions. Within weeks, the reformed Galactic Council ratified a new charter based on principles of collaborative development and cultural respect. The human quarantine was not only lifted but formally apologized for. 1 year after the Viridian fleet's failed attack, Captain John Miller, now Earth's official ambassador, stood again in the center of the council chamber. Around him sat representatives of hundreds of species, including many new members who had previously been deemed unworthy of council recognition. "We come from different worlds," John told the assembly. "We evolved in different conditions. We think in different ways. That diversity isn't a weakness to be mocked or suppressed. It's our greatest strength." The chamber, once filled with derision for humanity, applauded. Not because humans had defeated a powerful enemy, but because they had transformed an unfair system without becoming what they fought against. As John took his seat among equals, he thought about the journey from humiliation to transformation. They had mocked humanity in the Galactic Council. Humanity had answered not with vengeance, but with a better way forward for all species.